Welcome to the Project Mom Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Gorey, mom of a sweet baby girl and an ever-evolving entrepreneur. On this show, we will explore the intersection of motherhood and entrepreneurship. We will share stories of moms just like you and me with the goal of fostering community and comfort in knowing that we are not alone in our experiences. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to ensure you get all the updated episodes and releases. Welcome to today's episode of the Project Mom Podcast. Today I'm joined once again by my good friend Lauren Gold. She has been such a blessing in this chapter of my life and a huge confidant of mine as we navigate early motherhood. She is now working as a postpartum doula, offering virtual postpartum doula support and one-on-one coaching, in addition to kicking off some new mom circles. So Lauren, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me again. I'm thrilled.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here again.
Yay.
Dynamic duo.
Honestly,
for the second time.
I'm really excited about where this conversation goes because
me too.
I feel like we have these conversations regularly and we just don't record them, and we should. So don't mind my sicky voice. I'm still recovering from this lovely cold, as you know. So if voice cracks, we're just going to keep this real and keep it going.
Judgment-free zone.
Okay, so let's maybe just set the tone a little bit for today. So we had a conversation, many conversations, I can't even pinpoint it down to one, about different experiences that we've had over the course of our lives, right? It doesn't always just span through motherhood and this postpartum period. So I want us to dive a little bit into this and talk about how stories and narratives are really something that impact all of us as new parents, as people who are navigating just different seasons of life, whether it be motherhood or parenthood or not, right? And we can all relate to those like different experiences and expectations that perhaps we have on ourselves and kind of maybe don't realize where they're coming from, right? They're maybe just these stories and just narratives that we're taking as truth, but in reality, they don't have to be true at all. So I want us to really dive into that and share maybe a little bit. Let's start by setting the stage. Where did you get introduced to this concept of thoughts, that the stories in our minds are just telling us just that, stories and narratives, and how do we not take them as truth? Like, when did you first realize this was a concept that could exist?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're seeing a lot today is like a lot of memes flying around. And trust me, I love an Instagram reel. I love like a TikTok, of like self-help.
Yeah.
There's sort of like this self-help path or this career coaching or career consultancy path, whatever. And you hear a lot about that today. And you can, drop in names, Mel Robbins, whoever. I was first introduced to this concept when I was at my most recent employer, which was Asana. And they work with this like career consultancy, leadership group called Conscious Leadership Group. And it's a training that everyone at Asana goes through, it's really quite amazing. And the whole concept is that we carry around these stories. And it's all framed in a work context, but we carry around these stories around the things that we're experiencing or the things that we're doing that may or may not be true. And how can you take radical responsibility or radical ownership over the fact that you might be telling stories? And it's a very interesting training. We don't have nearly enough time to get into it, but the concept is that our thoughts are actually separate from us and may not reflect what actually is, what a camera would catch, right? And then how we then project what we think happened versus what actually did happen and how that influences us in the workplace. And so this concept of starting with, in any sort of conversation, whether it's a conflict or an interpersonal relationship or a work project or with yourself, starting with the story I tell myself is totally shifts this idea that maybe the story you're telling yourself isn't what's actually true, and unlocks an opportunity, I think, for more analysis, discussion, etc.
Yes. I feel like that's so powerful, right? If we can start to separate in our minds the stories that we're telling ourselves versus what actually might be reality, we can start to show up for ourselves differently, and we can start to show up for those around us differently. And I think that is so impactful and radical, because I don't think a lot of us even recognize that that is at play with ourselves, right? I feel like, right, you had mentioned it was something that was introduced to you just in your last employer. Like for me, it was something that I didn't really start to recognize that way until I started working one-on-one with a coach to help reframe some of these stories that I'm telling myself. And for me, it came up primarily in motherhood. I didn't really recognize it when I was still in the career space. Right. So just different phases of life give us these opportunities to start recognizing that. And I think there's like general, like surface level stories, like, as an employee or as a career woman, we have to do X, Y, and Z. And as a mom, we need to do X, Y, and Z. But then really when we get to the heart of it, there's probably like very deep rooted stories that are internalized in us that kind of run the gamut across all phases of our lives.
Yeah. And I think you can sort of look at those themes. I mean, there were a lot of career stories I was telling myself. So I guess this would be late 20s, right? I mean, my career path has been, I think, a little unconventional. I studied journalism. I had some internships related to journalism. I got my master's in journalism, but then I went straight to like a tech agency in like a program management role and did a little project management. And then I jumped to another startup in more of a brand marketing role, which was very different than the one before it. And then I pivoted to software implementation consulting and then customer success at another company. And now I'm working as this sole service provider, right? Going directly to the client. And I was telling a lot of stories about that. I mean, it sounds great when I summarize it there, but the story I was telling myself was that I wanted to progress in a more traditional way. I wanted to succeed in tech. I wanted the line on the resume. I wanted the promotion. And yet it never felt aligned for me. And while I was really grateful for those opportunities, I was burning out. Why am I burning out? What is wrong with me? The story I'm telling myself is that something's wrong with me, that I was feeling called to change jobs every couple of years. And every job, I think, was getting closer and closer to something that I was trying to reach, but I could not name or attain, right? And so while I watched my friends get promoted or stay at companies or move up the ladder and excel, and I was just fried, the story I was telling myself was that I'm not cut out for this, right? And really, I think I wish I spent less time telling stories and more time, I think, accepting myself for where I was in my timeline, what is happening right now, and trusting that it was all part of my larger timeline. And then, even at work, a lot of stories around thinking like what I believe is true is just true, which is kind of naive. But that's not how it is, right? My truth is not the only truth. And I think in work environments in particular, you need to acknowledge that you might be telling stories and there might be influences on your behavior, right?
Totally. And I think it's, interesting that you bring up like influences, right? It's like how we perceive a situation is not how perhaps somebody else perceives a situation. So it's so important to be able to maybe recognize that it's not the actual truth or the end all be all truth, and be curious and be open to kind of exploring what else is out there. And I think about too, like in terms of my personal experience in corporate, and we've talked about this too, like the trajectory that I was on. I ended up staying, I was only at 2 companies in my career, and never quite progressed the way I expected to progress. Like I was, I worked in sales, so I was hitting numbers. I was doing fine by all accounts. I was like almost coasting to an extent. I was able to like hit certain metrics. And then both times was the only 2 times I made changes was when I was faced with something that seemed completely mind-boggling to me. I was like, that came out of nowhere. Or I was like, I had feedback finally from, higher ups that were like, you need to do things differently. And I'm like, where the F is this coming from? Like, to me, I was very on like a one track, I was hitting the metrics. I was doing what I was asked to do. Nobody ever said anything to me, so then you get bombarded kind of by these like pivot points to make changes in your career. And I think, and it can be applied to any, phase of our lives. But I think for me, that was the experience of like, I just assumed things were great. And my truth was that I was doing well and things were succeeding because I wasn't seeing the perspective elsewhere, but I also was never asking until it was like smacking me in the face. So I think it's just interesting to think about like perception and like what is actually working for us, and kind of how do we take that as a blessing in the larger picture of things. So it's interesting. It's interesting to think. And I think too, like there's so many stories that we can tell ourselves around, what we're supposed to be doing in careers, especially as millennial women.
I think that there were a lot of stories going at work. It made me a better leader at work, to recognize that there are stories and this thought, like, what would a camera catch?
Yeah.
Wow. Like that really sort of shifts things. What would the facts say? And then what's the story you're telling about this? And what's the story I'm telling about this? So it shows up nicely in conflict, interpersonal, whatever. But I think this more introspective path, which I think is sort of what you and I are leaning toward when it comes to analyzing your career, analyzing where you're going, even more interesting to me. Like what are the stories that we're telling ourselves about our path? And, when we start to ease into this world of pregnancy, birth, postpartum, new motherhood, tons and tons of stories come to us both from like outside marketing and what we perceive as our experience. And that has been, I think, just a huge theme for me ever since, my pregnancy. And it continues. I continue to check myself to this day with like, what's the story I'm telling myself about this scenario?
Totally. And I think maybe we start there. Maybe we just see like kind of and share some of those reflections, because I think, right, hindsight's always a little bit clearer. And I think about, for me personally, and I've shared this many a times with you, I've shared this many a times on the podcast, like the initial stories that I was sharing for myself as I entered into this new phase was a lot of shoulds, and a lot of shoulds around the experience that I personally had growing up, around watching my mom be a mom to me and my sister, and this expectation that, we are almost self-sacrificing ourselves at a time for our children. And to me, it felt so overwhelming, right? So like I look back on it now and I recognize it doesn't have to be done that way. And like maybe that was my mom's truth and still kind of is her truth. And I think it's interesting when you start to talk about this more and more. Like I mentioned it to my mom, when I was, 6-7 months postpartum, and Olivia was, just as old. And I was like, how do you do this? Like, how do you get to a part where you're content with what your day-to-day now looks like? I feel like I am just putting everything on pause. And she said to me, Emily, like, you only have to do it until she's 3 or so and goes to school. And I'm like, what? So you have to also take into account like the perceptions that other people are living, the truths that other people are living on what's expected of them. And, how do we check those? And how do we say, wait, it doesn't actually have to be done that way?
Yeah. I mean, I want to like sort of back up maybe to like birth and postpartum. I mean, it's just like that to me. There's like a ton of stories around people's birth stories,
Totally.
right? And then also what that fourth trimester should look like. And we see a lot of like best month ever, best day ever, the day my child was born, best day of my life, or best 4 weeks with our newborn, or whatever it is. And that was not my experience. Right. And so I think that, when we start looking at, the truths, like there are some factoids, right? There are some facts, like the, hormones that rise, through your entire pregnancy and whatever, that's progesterone, HCG, estrogen, all going up, 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 up as you approach your birth. You're feeling great. After delivery, your progesterone and your estrogen plummet like very quickly, right? After birth. It's the biggest hormone drop. I just read this. It's the biggest hormone drop a woman will ever experience in her entire life, right? Progesterone and estrogen going all the way down, flatlining, right? And prolactin and oxytocin going up. And so story I told myself was like, I should be enjoying this. I mean, or I should feel better about this, or I should be able to handle this. And factually, like there are a lot of physical indicators that would tell you otherwise. And so I think specifically in this fourth trimester, you're trying to figure out nursing. Your doctor tells you one thing, your lactation consultant tells you another thing, your instincts are talking to you, but you're talking yourself out of it. All of these conversations were going on. And there were a lot of stories circulating in my head that I should be able to reconcile all of these voices and things going on, when in fact that was not going to be the case. And I think a lot of women really struggle. And this is part of why I'm starting to do the work that I'm doing. I think a lot of women really struggle to find a trusted voice to aid their own, right? Because everyone's saying, trust your instincts, trust your instincts, right? The story I'm telling myself is that I should be able to trust my instincts. And yet I'm awake in the night scrolling through Facebook groups, feeling very alone, right? And so I think until, about 3 months postpartum, when those hormone levels balance out a little and come back to their pre-pregnancy level, I mean, like you're telling stories, right? And your hormones are telling stories. And I just think that it's such an overwhelming time for new parents and women in particular. And something that I don't think gets discussed enough, frankly.
It definitely doesn't. I mean, along those lines, like think about the narrative going through my mind at that time. Like I chose this. I chose to be a mom. I should be happier in these times. This was a choice I made. I'm not happier. So now I just have to accept it as is. And I think for me, there's also the extension of like the fourth trimester. You're absolutely correct, right? In terms of like hormone levels, physical changes, our bodies are just trying to regulate right alongside sleep deprivation and physical healing as well, right? In terms of how our birth itself actually goes. And I think there's not enough credit or support that goes into recognizing that we are allowed to need support during that time, right? I think people just go into it thinking like, okay, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to have to do it. This is a choice I made. I'm in it for the long haul. So there's not enough of that. And then I think there's also just this recognition or this story that once you're done with the fourth trimester, everything should be back to normal, or you should be good to go, right? And it's not. I mean, we know from research and studies that have been done that, it can take up to a year to, feel
even
longer to be better, to feel back into your body, right? I mean, they don't recommend you get pregnant again until 2 years postpartum, right? Because your body physically is nowhere near the level of, pre-pregnancy function, right? So there's just a lot of that. And I think we don't give ourselves as new moms enough credit for just what it is we're going through. And there's all these stories that we're just not doing it right.
Yes. The story I told myself was that I couldn't handle it and I should be able to. The story I told myself was I should have known this would be hard and prepared more accordingly. I mean, that's sad. I feel bad for myself. I feel bad for myself. I think, of course, hindsight is 2020, but there's just a lot of second guessing, a lot of hormonal changes, a lot of physical things that are ongoing that are influencing, I think, the way we talk to ourselves, right? And the way that we're handling what's in front of us. And you mentioned your mom. It's funny talking to our mother's generation. I think our generation is doing things a little bit differently. we were given this message, like, and you and I have talked about this, we were given this message that we could do it all. And I don't know what do it all really means. But we're all, seeking education or seeking careers and seeking partners and seeking families and trying to build these families. But then you sort of realize that you can't do it all. I mean, or you can do it, but in a different way. And there's not necessarily education really on how to navigate these challenges, right? And so moving into this doula work, I think a lot of my focus has been to become like a trusted voice, really in that fog of the fourth trimester, someone to offer perspective, someone to tell you that you might be telling some stories, to call it out for you, to check you on the things you might be saying or feeling, and yeah, provide that support that I think everyone could really use during such a sensitive time,
Totally. And I love that you highlight that too, because I think I look back to my experience, right? And we met when the girls were, I don't know, 5, 6 months respectively, right? Like right around that. So we're in the thick of it at this point, right? And we may have shared this in the last episode. And right, we met at a mommy and me class, and it ultimately felt like we were able to be that for each other. It really wasn't until that moment where we like started having some conversations, and I was like, oh, wait, this chick might actually know what I'm going through. Like, wait, she's actually being open to sharing some feedback with me around, her experience. And, I felt comfortable enough to share some things with you. And we were like, let's make this a thing. And I am so grateful for that, because I think not everybody finds that so quickly. And I think we were able to find that in each other. And I want to just highlight in here too, there are ways to find yourself that support. If this episode is resonating and you're feeling like maybe these are some thoughts that you're having as, someone who's listening, there are ways to find some support, whether that be putting yourself out there a little bit more, willing to be a little bit more vulnerable, but also finding somebody, and also like yourself, whose mission and values really align with supporting women through this time, because these stories can really run the gamut and take over.
Yes. The story I told myself was that I was alone in all those middle of the night feedings and 3 a.m. moments, right? And I don't think I was. I mean, biologically, I know I wasn't. Surely there were other babies and little nightlights on, all throughout the world in the middle of the night. And that brings me comfort now to think about that. But this evolution of finding your support and what that looks like for you, I think is unique to each individual. And to offer my past self a little bit of self-compassion, I didn't know what kind of support I was going to need. I didn't know how I was going to feel. And I try to tell my friends and clients, in their second or third trimester with ease and with love, that while this is a very exciting time, you don't really know what your postpartum period is going to look like. And I'm not just talking about mental health. I'm not just talking about postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety. I'm talking about what your birth is going to look like, your physical recovery, what your emotional state is going to be like, what your family network looks like, what kind of grandparents you have in your life, what kind of hired help, what kind of village you really have. Right. And if you can reach a mom to be sooner rather than later, I think you can sort of catch them before some crazy stories start coming out in postpartum. However, I know that I was in a very happy bubble when I was at the end of my pregnancy. And I don't know that those messages would have landed until I was in it. And so I guess the story I told myself was that no one else was going through what I was going through, and I was going to have to go out this alone. And I guess if my message now would be, you need support. I don't know what it looks like, whether it's one-on-one or finding a mom friend like you, or attending classes, or talking to your doctor, or finding a therapist. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that I can find more people at that vulnerable state of life, right? And help intercept those stories before things really drag them down, right?
Totally.
And drag their families down.
I love that you share that, because I want to share kind of the opposite experience. So I knew going into having my first kid that I was terrified of being a mom. I was already doing some one-on-one coaching, was already starting to identify some of these stories that were, really infiltrated in my mind on how motherhood had to be, the sacrifices that I was going to have to make, the martyrdom that was going to have to, be at play. And I was already doing a lot of work ahead of time to recognize those stories. I still fell into that experience of the story I told myself was, I'm just clearly not strong enough to do this, despite the support I already had. So I must just continue on this way. It's not going to get better because I've already tried the work. And I think in the spirit of kind of reflection and sharing back on that is like, that's really where the work continues to be. And that's why I think, to your point, you don't really know, despite how much prep you do, or if the, reflection lands, or, if that, work ahead of time, you don't really know how it's going to resonate with you in real life experiences. And I think that's just such a beautiful reminder of like, you can do all the prep ahead of time, but you really cannot control some of the outcomes of what your birth's going to look like, what the experiences are going to look like, how your hormones are going to react, how your physical recovery is going to look, how your kid is feeding, are they sleeping? And I think just remembering that those outcomes are not a reflection of you or the work that you've done or haven't done ahead of time to get yourself into this situation is key. First things first, but also to remember that you can choose to do things differently and find some support. And I think for me, that was the biggest thing. I never shared some of those continual resentments I had because I just felt like I tried to do the work and it just is what it was and it wasn't working. So this must be how everybody felt. And just no one talked about it, right? The story was that this was everybody's experience, even if we weren't talking about it. So I shouldn't complain. This is what I've chose. This is what I welcomed. This is what I wanted. So I think just with that reflection, it doesn't have to be, right? And maybe we can use me as a case study going into this second pregnancy, but I'm still trying to do some work with leaving the door open for additional support after he's born, because you really can't tell. You don't know.
Yeah. The story I told myself was that I should be able to do it all myself.
Yeah.
I don't know where I got that story. I think let's blame society. I think society told me that story. But I told my mom, I think I was around a year postpartum and I was starting to think about weaning, breastfeeding. And I told her, I said, my martyrdom is not cute. It's no longer cute. I recognized that I was being a martyr. And I didn't know how to put that backpack down. I just had this story going that I should be able to do it all myself. And I don't know why I felt so strongly that everything baby related had to be me. Couldn't put the baby in the hands of someone else, couldn't bear to be away for too long, all of those things. And I know every woman probably comes to that in her own time. And I don't judge any woman for her timeline, but I think it was really damaging for me. Mothering and parenting cannot and should not be done alone. And I think other countries have really great models for this, countries with better maternity leaves that have mandatory counselors who swing by your house, mandatory physical therapy, more village style, societal structures, or countries where it's more normal for extended relatives to live in the home, et cetera, these sort of built-in support systems. But I hear what you're saying really deeply when you're like, I guess I need to shut up, because this is just how it is. And I'm really hopeful that this is the generation that says like, this is not actually how it has to be. And you can assemble your team, and it doesn't need to be like a going at it alone type of adventure,
Totally. And just having like going through this the second time around, right? Building this support team, doing things differently, right? Like I have a lactation consultant on board. You and I are going to do some work together in the postpartum space. I have a birth doula already lined up, right? There are things that I'm putting in place this go around, but it's not cheap. And that's right. The frustration. Also, it's like
it's a big
society, problem. The structures that we live in, those systems that are already in place really don't support this village lifestyle. They don't really support this. And I think that's also a story here, right? From society and the systems that are in place, I'm not worthy of that. And I think there's a lot to be said, and we won't go into it around, the medical system and how we get support for ourselves, like, systemically and things like that. But it's just, for me, it's a hard one to swallow. And there's a lot of gratitude that I have to be able to financially support myself this way with these types of additional measures to get me through some of the things that are giving me fear or pause this next go around.
Something that comes up with my friends a lot, and now clients, is no one gets a straight path. No one gets a straight, easy path through this. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you tell me. Something is going to be challenging. Your pregnancy, your birth, your physical recovery from birth, your emotional, hormonal, mental health recovery from the birth, your postpartum, your physical health or the physical health of your child, God forbid, of course, breastfeeding, your child, spit up, gas, reflux, sleep, the behavior and temperament of the child, how postpartum and just welcoming a baby or a baby number one, baby number two into your family disrupts your family dynamic and how that affects your partnership, your relationship, your career. Like something will be touched, something will be challenging. And what I have been trying to tell my clients most recently is, when the bump comes in the road, I'm so glad you had a great birth, or I'm so glad you're feeling great, postpartum. Oh, all of a sudden, like baby's up all night, or baby has terrible gas pain and reflux, or whatever it is. I'm here for you. Something will be hard. There will be a bump in this road. And how are you going to handle it? Hopefully you have some people on your side, right? Some support, experts, groups, doctors, I don't know. Hopefully you can find someone on your team to really help you get through it. But I just sort of want to validate, like, if something feels hard for you, it's because it is, and you're not the only one who's gone through this hard thing. And prepare if you, I don't want to scare people, but if something's not hard yet, I can almost guarantee that there will be a hard thing. And what are the stories you're telling about those hard things, right? So that we can break it down and help you get through it.
Yeah.
Really is my goal.
Yeah. I love that too. And I think what a nice reminder is too, from what you just shared, of like, when things inevitably get hard, and I think however we perceive hard, right, like you said, is valid. It's absolutely hard in the experience in which we're receiving it. And I think the big thing there is, what is your plan? What is the game plan? And I think it is a nice reminder that you don't just have to have a quote unquote professional, right? I'm grateful and blessed that I can hire some professionals, but I think about back to that first year, right? Like, you are such an amazing confidant for me that we were able to start recognizing some of those stories and at least validating that our experiences were similar. So whether or not we're actually being like, oh, the story I'm telling myself is, we were able to at least validate for one another. So I think that's such a amazing takeaway of like, when things inevitably get hard, who can you call? Who can you reach out to? Who is around the corner? Who's staying with you? And I think that might be maybe the biggest reflection we can have going into new seasons of life, whether that be another child, a new business, we're taking a new job, we're starting a relationship, leaving a relationship, right? Whatever that ultimately looks like for us, like who can we call when we inevitably face something that poses a challenge to us, right? And it doesn't have to be someone that's paid. It can be somebody who's a beautiful reflection for you, or a new friend, or, who can give you support in these like little micro moments.
I think back, everything you're saying resonates and reminds me of, did you ever watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yeah.
So they're getting towards the end, right? And they have all these options to help them answer the questions. And one was poll the audience, right? And I loved that, right? I love this concept. And this is for everyone, right? No matter what you're going through, whether it's postpartum, with a baby or otherwise, figure out who your audience is, who you will poll. Because look, Facebook groups, that's a pretty big audience. It's the wild, wild west. It's the wild, wild west there. But I learned pretty quickly who my audience was going to be. And some of it was, okay, this friend was also exclusively breastfeeding, so we can talk breastfeeding. And this friend's child is 8 months older than mine, right? So she has a little bit more perspective. Oh, and this friend, I know that her child also had, a tongue tie, right? So can we talk about these things? And it's sort of like assembling your crew and knowing who you're going to poll, right? When you need help. Now, the downside is don't poll too many people, right? Because the more people you ask, the more opinions you're going to get. But I really liked this idea of just polling your audience and like, let me see what Michelle says. Let me see what Hillary says. Let me see what Julie has to say. And then, okay, I can take it back and I can form my own decision and make the decision that's best for me. What's the other one? Call a friend. I used to love that stuff. So good. I really did. It's like call a friend, phone a friend. Again, like the specific experts. And to me, if you translate this to birth, baby's first year, whatever you want to talk about it, it's having your friends assembled, your lactation consultant, your postpartum doula, your local resource, your local mom group, your verified resources of someone who is really an expert in lactation, right? And someone who you can really trust. What was the other one? Eliminate your options or something? It was like, where you could get rid of.
You could choose to eliminate two of the wrong answers, right?
Yeah. And I love that show. Wonder where he is. Regis Philbin. And when you think about eliminating your options, right? It's how can I simplify this? Like, how can I tune out the noise and like really parse
down.
Parse down. Yeah. To get down to like what my real priorities are. Right. And to me, that's like discuss with your partner, right? Or whoever is raising this child with you of like, what are the facts and like what really works for me? And like, I need to tune out this noise and like really, really get down to like, am I going left or am I going right?
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
Were there any others?
No, I think that was it. I think it was three. I think there's three. Yeah.
I know, but I really thinking about like polling your audience is really big to me, while also remembering that like your voice is the most important. But if you have a good audience, like if you have a good circle around you, they're going to check you on it a little bit.
Right.
I mean, I remember like, I was like baby-led weaning or, are you doing purees and all this stuff? Yeah. And one of my friends said to me, she was like, you can do both. I'm like, what? And she just sort of called me out on the fact of like, it's varied, there are shades of gray, like, I don't know, and that was really a helpful perspective for me. I mean, I told myself so many stories, right? I told myself I shouldn't be feeling this way. Well, lo and behold, there are other people who are feeling this way, right? I told myself that I was alone, and that's not true. Mm-hmm. I told myself so many stories about my body, particularly as it related to breastfeeding and weight gain around breastfeeding, and increased hunger around breastfeeding. I mean, man, I had a lot of stories going around in that world. And a friend pointed out to me, she said, you know what, Lauren, I've always known you to be someone who's really in touch with your body. And would you consider for a second that maybe this is just where your body needs to be right now? like, oh, wow. So many stories going
Yeah,
about what I thought I should be or where I thought I should be postpartum. And really, like, a quick pull of the audience was able to kind of bring me back down to earth. Right.
totally. And I think too, right, there's this story that there's like one right path too, of like, oh, the new research shows that baby-led weaning over purees, reduces the risk of choking later or whatever, right? There's all these, we can really get bogged down in research behind different choices that you can choose to do in motherhood, breastfeeding versus formula. We can really get lost in that rabbit hole. And I think just the reminder and to have that group around you to say, hey, wait, there isn't just one right way to do this, or try this way. And if it doesn't work for you, try another way. Right. I think the biggest thing for me was around, like breastfeeding. Like I could not breastfeed my daughter for honestly the life of her. I could not do it. I could not do it. Physically, my body was not capable of producing for one reason or another. And I think there was so many stories around that. One of them being, there's something wrong with me, that I should
Mm-hmm.
be able to do this, that this is the highest
So
and best
toxic.
path. Right. And to your point, right, just a couple of conversations like with my sister who was going through something similar at the time with her newborn, I didn't know you at the time, but like with, a couple of friends of mine. And I was one of the first that had kids. So I had some friends that had kids, but they were kind of like second circle friends. Like it was none of my like best friends. So, I had some women that would call and they'd be like, they even would check me on it. They'd be like, Emily, like if it's not working, it's just not working. There's nothing wrong with you. So I think just being able to find people, even if they are kind of second circle, to bounce some ideas and some stories off of to make different choices. It can't get much healthier than that.
Totally. So many stories that we've both sort of touched on. The story I told myself was I should be grateful, I should be fulfilled, I should be happy. But, now I sort of like this idea of like respecting the stories a little bit
Yeah.
more. And maybe wouldn't it have been nicer to just to take them as clues or indicators? Okay, the story I'm telling myself is I should feel more fulfilled, but I'm not. And why not? And can we dig into why not? Why, right? And maybe make changes.
Yeah, totally.
And that's a big conversation that comes up in these client sessions of mine is, okay, in postpartum or a message I'm hearing all the time is I felt like I had spent my 20s, really finding myself and working through my stuff. I got clarity on my career path. I had clarity on my relationship with my body, finding exercise, learning how to nourish myself properly. I found clarity on who I wanted my life partner to be. What were those qualities? I was fortunate to find my life partner and, get clarity on our relationship and get married. And suddenly, like, I've sort of flatlined. I walked away from my career, or I started a family and I'm trying to juggle it with my career. A lot of stories going on about identity, right? This huge identity shift of motherhood. Who I was and who I am now are different. And what are the stories I'm telling myself about that? Right. And how do I come out of that? And how do I, become the caterpillar that transforms into the butterfly, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that it's just not something that you can sort. Maybe some people can do it by themselves. I certainly can't. I just don't know, how to navigate something like this totally alone. And I frankly, I wouldn't recommend going at it alone to literally anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much in there that we can't, like, in our minds, in our emotions, that are really, like you said, clues, right? And I'm going to do an episode on this. I've already written it. I think by the time this is released, oh man, testing my schedule knowledge. I don't know if that episode will be out or not. I think it will, about emotions, right? What are emotions actually telling us? And can they be these beautiful messengers for us to guide us to a place that really works for us in this season of our lives. And you're right. I mean, to be able to sit internally with our own thoughts and check ourselves and say, okay, the story I'm telling myself is, and I'm feeling sad, angry, resentful, stuck, scared, not good enough, not important enough, whatever those stories might be. And then be able to say, okay, what is this telling me about how I'm living my life or how I'm aligning my values with my actions? What is it? It's almost an impossible task. I mean, it's so overwhelming. Like I think about, having done some one-on-one coaching, have some tools and tips and tricks to help me do that. But I'm by far and large not as successful at that as I am when I'm working with somebody who checks me on those stories. And I think if we want to do things differently, make some changes, we have to be kind of willing to do some things differently. And part of that is finding somebody to help us do it.
As we're talking about this, I'm trying to cultivate some self-compassion and grace, I think, toward myself and who I was going through this, I would say, maybe first year postpartum. Yeah. I really love this idea of respecting your stories, and like respecting what I viewed maybe as mistakes, yes, or pitfalls or turns, twists and turns in my story. One thing that I don't think gets discussed enough is postnatal depletion. Very common for women to enter into a vitamin D deficiency in the first year postpartum, iron deficiency, B12, yada, yada. I mean, that list really does go on and on. And I think I had a story going about my energy levels, and I thought it was just because I was exclusively nursing, and lots of statistics about what breastfeeding does to your energy levels. It's like running a marathon each day or walking 7 miles. I don't know the exact statistic, but I sort of looked around and I noticed that a lot of women around me with babies the same age as mine had bounced back in terms of energy levels, their ability to go out and do things, getting out of the house. And I was trying so hard, I think at like 6, 8, 10 months postpartum to get out, to get going, to do things. And I was just so exhausted by the end of the day. And I had this story going that I should be able to handle it. Everyone else can handle it. And why am I so tired? And maybe this is because I'm in my 30s. I don't know, a lot of stories that I had so many stories going that I should be able to handle this better. And it wasn't until my annual with my OB, and she said, I think we should run some blood work. Right. And it turned out that I had a crazy vitamin deficiency. And as soon as I started supplementing with that vitamin, it was night and day with my energy levels. And so to me, we shouldn't just write things away, analyze, reason things away. I think women are very quick to reason away their symptoms. And I wish I had listened a little more closely or used it, as an indicator and really trusted myself to get myself looked at. And I tell my clients, get some blood work, get your blood work done and listen to your body, listen to your stories. Is it a story up here, right? Or is it a story in here, right? In your gut, right? We really do have a voice. And can you tap back into it in the flurry of all the, over analysis paralysis, information being thrown at us, yada, yada, things, words coming out of your Facebook groups, etc.
Seriously. I think that's such a beautiful reminder because there is like this insane bounce back culture that we should be able to like do things in a certain amount of time and feel better. And it isn't until we start to have those conversations, right? That experience of yours in particular is like just a great reminder that if we can share some of these feelings, whether it be with providers or friends or support systems or whatever, like there's likely something that's going to come from it that we didn't think of on our own, or we didn't think to explore on our own, right? It's like you never would have said, oh, maybe it's vitamins, or maybe my body's just
Right.
not the way it's like functioning the way it's supposed to be, right? It was these narratives and these stories in your head. So just again, coming back to that community, this support system that you create for yourself, and just how vital and how impactful that can be on this experience. Just, I feel, as we're talking, I just always have to give myself a little bit of grace too, because you reflect on it, and I think the biggest thing that you said too is, right, can we respect those stories? Can we respect those experiences versus having regret and frustration and anger? And I think just having a little bit of compassion for myself and the experience that I went through the first time, and knowing that I may not be able to control if those feelings start to show up again, but I do have some tools in my pocket now to help me navigate through those sooner, or to look at things sooner, or to reflect on something sooner, to check me sooner before I let myself just spiral into a situation that really doesn't have to be.
Yeah. I think if I knew then what I know now, I would have gotten some baseline blood work before getting pregnant. I would have educated myself more during the pregnancy on what hormonal changes to expect and what the first few months really look like from a baby care perspective, but also more breastfeeding education, more like sleep education, and also, the woman's body and healing education. I think I would have focused less on, although I loved, the baby items, picking your stroller. That was really fun. And I don't want to take that away from anyone. I think that's wonderful and so cute and exciting. But I think I would have spent more time, energy, and money on assembling, my postpartum care team, finding a therapist, so much work. Right. Finding someone who works with your insurance, et cetera. I think I would have gotten, a therapist, a birth or doula, a postpartum something or another, and found some sort of support group or community or classes or new mom circle, to really find and create this new world for myself. Right. Once I had that baby.
Totally. And I think ultimately I'm contemplating putting something together, in terms of what I've done to prepare for this baby, kind of this go around in terms of reflection. And maybe that's something we'll throw together and release right around the same time of this episode, of that reflection of, if I knew then what I know now, this is what I would have done, and here's what I'm doing now. And I think as you go through it the first time, there's always some blind spots. There's no way that you're going to be able to like prep yourself for everything. But I think it's interesting as you're going through it a second time, at least for me, to be able to say that felt like a blind spot for me the first time. I don't want to feel that way again. And setting up some of those support systems in place kind of ahead of the game, at this point. So I'm actually feeling excited for this birth, which I maybe will regret saying on air and in a recording, but I wasn't always that excited with the first one. Like, there was a lot of fear that was coming up for me with the first one. So I'm thrilled that there's a little bit more excitement this go around, because I don't feel like I'm going at it alone anymore, which is really a beautiful thing.
I love that. With every birth, a new mom is also born.
Yes.
I love
We'll
that.
see what she's like this go around.
Can't wait to meet her. Can't wait to meet you. Emily 2.0, 3.0.
We'll find out. There might be a couple iterations in the next go.
Oh my God. But there was a new you and a new me when our daughters were born.
Yeah.
And we need to allow space for that, and, give some grace towards those stories that we were telling when maybe we were becoming who we are now. And I think when you have number two, you will be new again.
Yeah.
And I have to remind the second timers of that, because the second timers know some things, you're less phased by the color of the duty diaper,
Right.
or, the fussiness. You have your confidence, I think, around
Yes.
certain elements of baby care and how you want things to be done. But you will be new again in other ways. And there may be some stories there too, right? So, tread lightly and with grace, I think.
Yes.
If I may, what stories do you think are coming up for you today as you're nearing the end of your pregnancy?
Honestly, a lot of mine have been around business. So actually like launching and sustaining the identities of me outside of motherhood. So for me, honestly, when I first found out I was pregnant, the story I told myself was, I'm going to have to sacrifice again. Or I'm not, it's an interesting one. I'm not worthy enough of taking time for myself now, even though it's interesting because that's one that I absolutely worked through with my daughter. So it really is interesting to watch these stories come back up again in different phases because they're ones that you think maybe you've processed, and it's an ongoing journey, right? So for me, the big one is around like, how do I support myself, my individual identities, things that bring me joy, continue to help me feel like me, at the same time as wanting to still be present with my new family? And how do I not fall into martyrdom in a time when it's going to feel challenging to put myself first? And I think for me, that's just reminding myself that I'm worthy of putting myself first, which is why I like immediately came to you and I was like, I want you to help me because, right, a lot of the work that a postpartum doula does is, and, kind of correct me if I'm wrong, is like, you support the mom, right? It's like, how are we healing? How are we supporting our bodies? How are we supporting our nourishment? And whether that be physically or mentally or emotionally. And then, especially as second time moms, right? You said it, the baby care is kind of already in place. We know kind of logically how to take care of a baby, feed, sleep, bathe. We kind of have all those like already down pat, but it's the new experience of what our bodies need that's really up in the air until we experience it. So for me, yeah, it's like, how do I remember to continue to put myself first? And how do I support myself in putting some systems in place, whether that be postpartum support or business support, to keep the momentum going on everything that I've created thus far for me.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I phrased it like this, you spend all this time like building your house, right?
Yeah.
And building your business, or building the kind of parent you want to be, or the type of spouse you want to be, building your friendships, building your community. And then like, I feel like baby comes along and it's like you've just sort of flatline, or it like crumbles to the ground or something. Yeah. And you have to rebuild. And that was a tough pill for me to swallow.
Yes.
The work is ongoing. It's a
process, always. Mm-hmm.
It's a process. And that's why we see the same stories come up time and time again. Yeah. I have a lot of stories around mistakes, perfectionism, shoulda, coulda, woulda, and so we start to identify, like you say, martyrdom. We start to identify these patterns and start to break through, build yourself back up. What do we want your new house to look like? How do we design it? And with every new baby, I think there's another renovation coming, right?
Yes.
And while we can plan ahead, you're not entirely sure what it's going to look like, right?
Yeah.
And just this framing of the story I tell myself is hopefully can be really helpful to pull yourself out of it, right? When you're in some sort of spiral or thought pattern that's not exactly serving you.
Totally. I think maybe with that, let's wrap it up here, I want to give you a quick opportunity just to let everybody listening know where they can find you. How can they engage with you, whether it be from this perspective of a new mom circle, one-on-one coaching, virtual support? What does that look like, and how can they reach out?
Sure. You can find me at As Told by Lauren Gold on Instagram and on my website. I'm currently offering one-on-one virtual postpartum doula support. So think about those fourth trimester things, emotional support for mom, and also troubleshooting some of the feeding, sleeping, and common themes that you see with infants and babies, now transitions, navigating weaning, or your pumping schedule, whatever it might look like. I'm here for that. And yeah, I'm kicking off these new mom groups, hopefully sorted by due date, to put women together, right, and meet in person. This would be most likely in person, although virtual is also an option if there was enough interest, to really help women cultivate and develop that community, find themselves again, make friends, connect with women whose babies are the same age, and use me really as that guide to facilitate and lead conversations around these common themes that everyone's going through, whether it's going back to work, figuring out childcare, talking about your birth stories, et cetera, et cetera. So stay tuned for more on that. And yeah, thank you for having me again.
Yes.
I'm so lucky.
I love it. I also just want to highlight from what you said too, in terms of the work that you're offering. Like, I love that it isn't just the fourth trimester, right? You're really highlighting that the ongoing work is and can be potentially into the years in the making, right? It's like we are always, as new moms and as business owners, navigating something, right? So it's like, whether that be weaning from breastfeeding, or nap transitions, or sleep struggles, right? Those don't just happen while the baby is 3 months old or less, right? I mean, I'm still dealing with sleep struggles. I feel like we talk about sleep, you and I, regularly, still, and our daughters are over 2 at this point. So I love that you highlight that and you offer that, because it's so vital. We're not alone past that fourth trimester.
You're not alone. And what I said before, I said, with the birth of every new baby comes the birth of a new mom. I also believe that as you move through every stage with your child or your children, you also become someone new, right? So you go from the infant stage to the baby stage, early toddlerhood, middle toddlerhood, late toddlerhood, young child. With every new phase your child enters, you too enter a new phase.
Absolutely.
And how can you navigate that as gracefully as possible is what I like to focus on.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So for anyone listening who is interested in gaining some support, whether that be in the fourth trimester, in pregnancy, in the years that follow around motherhood, please reach out to Lauren. Please reach out to me. We are happy to be communities, sounding boards, and just build each other up and support one another. So Lauren, thank you so much for being here. I always love chatting with you.
Me too. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Probably in an hour. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, please help us out and leave a review wherever you listen, and consider sharing with your friends. If you're interested in learning a bit more about the project or want to share your story, please visit our website linked in our show notes below.